a great conversation about harnessing the power of FinOps methodology. So we have Matt Drankowski, who's going to be joining us in just a moment on the stage. He's an accomplished DevOps architect, cloud expert, and a technology leader with a passion for driving innovation and over a decade of experience. He excels in developing high-performance applications, optimizing complex systems, and leading cross-functional teams. I know something many of you are getting used to or doing already as well. So he has made significant contributions to various industries, from manufacturing to agriculture, healthcare, and even e-commerce, to name a few, all while delivering cutting-edge software solutions. So I am very excited to welcome our next speaker. Matt, welcome to the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. That was a great introduction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So let me share my slide deck. So let me start. I mean, that introduction was perfect, but I will just add for myself that on top of cloud architect, DevOps engineer, I actually tend to take a lot of hats during my projects, but recently, more often than not, I tend to call myself cloud economist. So this is a self-appointed title. There is nothing official just yet. So we are trying to actually bring a new framework and try to educate people about it. And this is actually the purpose of this presentation. So I started my journey on the cloud around 2012. I've worked with companies of different sizes. I work with Fortune 100 companies. Also, I work with early stage startups. So I was exposed to different challenges and different goals for these companies. And what was really consistent throughout that journey is that I realized that when companies try to adopt cloud services, they face the similar challenges they face. So when they try to adopt those cloud services, they see that there is a lot of opportunities for them waiting behind the corner. But there is that one aspect that they don't put enough effort to look into, and that's financial aspect. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about today. We are going to talk about money, and we are going to talk about money that we spend on cloud services. And I'm going to present you a framework that will hopefully can help everyone to control that spend more effectively. So I'm going to today, this is a very brief session, so I'm not going to do any deep dive today. So I'm going to start with by talking about cloud computing, because this is an integral part of FinOps. I'm going to talk about why we need cloud computing. We'll look at the current IT landscape and what was before. And I will also stress that cloud services, they can be a double-edged sword. The sales team at AWS or Azure Cloud, they will try to sell off the benefits, and they are there. But in practice, when it comes to adoption, it's not always as easy. Then we will move on to horror stories from cloud users. Some of these stories are from my own experience, from my observation, working with my clients. Some of them are just known in the industry. That will be our transition to FinOps. So what FinOps framework is, and then I will talk about four pillars of FinOps. So what are those areas that need to be implemented in order to be able to effectively manage your cloud spend? And finally, just when we move on to that more practical aspect of this presentation, I will just talk about some simple tips and tricks that you can take quite easily to optimize your cloud spend straight away. And we will just cover basics today, but if you are happy to actually explore more, I will be more than keen to actually get into discussion with you after this presentation. So why do we need cloud computing? So we are tempted by many benefits in cloud. So everyone must have heard about cloud. If you're an engineer from the technical background, you must have heard about a lot of services that are offered by cloud computing. But why is it great? So let's take a look at what was before. So I think this would be a great comparison. So in the old days of traditional, let's call it traditional computing, we used to have physical servers, physical data centers, and organizations, they had to manage that this way or another. This brought a lot of maintenance overhead. You actually, if you wanted to add more compute resources, you had to buy more hardware. If you wanted to add more storage, you had to buy more hardware. But what about underutilized resources? What about trying some ideas? What about some doing some POCs. This was really hard. The development cycles were much longer at the time, and then came cloud computing. That idea that this is cloud, but these are still normal servers. These are still data centers, but they are just managed by someone else, by other companies. This is just completely abstracted away from us. We don't really need to care about hardware anymore. And this is a huge benefit because by having cloud computing in place, we can just focus on what we really want to do on the cloud. We can focus on bringing innovation. We can focus on reducing that maintenance overhead. We can try to actually introduce some kind of not serverless solutions. We can try to reduce our costs. There are many ways that we can benefit from cloud computing. But as I already said, cloud computing is really tempting, and I actually recommend all my clients to start using cloud computing in very limited use cases. Using on-premise servers, your own data centers may be beneficial, but this is really rare. And in most cases, cloud computing is just great. But the challenge here is that when you try to adopt cloud computing, especially at the beginning of your journey, there's so much knowledge to gather, so much planning to do, and even if you have a really great engineering team, after the initial phase of adoption, you end up somewhere on the scale of the cost, performance, and reliability. I haven't seen a single company that managed to actually achieve all expected outcomes in the first phase. So this is a continuous work. Companies, they need to work continuously on improving the infrastructure. If you are a large company, if we are talking like Fortune 100 companies, normally just lift and shift may be the best start. Lift and shift is basically just taking your mindset of traditional data centers and you move that mindset and the infrastructure in the same form to cloud. This is an option because that can actually help you get up to speed with that transition. But by taking all these steps, you are not going to achieve reliability, performance, and cost. And even if you are like a technological company, I noticed that engineering teams tend to focus on technology, which is quite obvious. This is interesting. I actually also very interested about technology myself, but by doing that, you can achieve great performance. You can achieve great reliability. So on that scale of reliability performance, you can be on top. But when it comes to cost, this is that aspect that tends to be left behind. And the challenge here is also that engineering teams tend to say that this is what it is, this is how it's supposed to be. So they focus, and I was actually in the same position myself in many cases. This is management leadership. They need to trust that this is the only approach. So they were tempted to move to cloud because they were hoping that they are going to save money. In many organizations, non-technical organizations, money is an important factor. So they were hoping, all right, we are going to save a lot of money on cloud. But then they move their workloads and all of a sudden they are paying way more. And they try to actually bring some this discounts program to the workloads. This just doesn't work out. And engineering teams, they tell them, all right, no, there's no way to improve that. So that's why actually I'm showing here there is that sad phase on the cost scale that the financial aspect tends to be a challenge for organization. And there is a solution. There is a set of principles and actions you can take to actually make things better why not affecting your engineering teams, why not affecting your engineering innovation, because that should also always go hand in hand. So before we actually move on to talk about what kind of principles we can follow to make this better, I just want to show you a couple of stories that can actually highlight that this can really lead to huge problems for companies if there are no guardrails, no governance. So there was one company. This was actually a company I used to work with. They had relatively large infrastructure, and there was one team that developed a custom-built backup system, automated backup system, and in principle, it was great. And they wanted to embrace modern technology, modern service on AWS, which is also great. So they looked into AWS Elastic File System Volume. This is a great storage. This network storage, low latency storage. It's great, but it's expensive and it's very scalable. And if we connect those two factors, this can really lead to disastrous effects. And there was a glitch in that backup system, and it was supposed to actually overwrite existing data. So every backup, it was very regular backup. Every backup was supposed to overwrite the previous one. But something went wrong, and it actually started writing that new data on top. So the size of that volume that can scale out automatically without any control, it started growing exponentially. And I actually realized that there is some kind of anomaly on the system. And it turned out that for the single volume, the company paid $200,000 for a single month. In total, it cost around $360,000. And when I reached out to that engineering team, I asked them, is that the expected outcome? And this wasn't the expected outcome. We did some improvements on the underlying backup system. We reduced the size of the volume, Elastic File System volume. We also introduced some lifecycle policies to that volume, and they managed to actually reduce the monthly cost from $200,000 to $300, full stop, just $300. So this is like a huge difference, and this is a risk. It actually can lead companies to go bust if this is not controlled correctly. In many cases, if you are actually surprised by some kind of glitch, you can discuss with AWS team to actually, you can negotiate, and in some cases, they can actually, they can cancel this billing. But this is a gray area, so it's just better to have that governance. It's better to control over any anomalies on your system, because you don't really want to limit self-service for your engineers. You don't really want to have any kind of like approval system, because this is going to be slow. This is going to slow down all your development work, innovation. This is not what you should have. What you should have is some kind of governing systems that will keep you updated and let you be proactive about your cloud spend. Another example is on many cloud providers, there is a concept of reserved instances. So this is a commitment-based plan. You can define that, all right, I'm going to spend $10,000 per month for another year. You can commit that this is going to be your spend for another year. And if you define this spend limit and the term, then they can give you large discounts. Cloud providers can give you large discounts. And this is great, because sometimes the discount actually can reach up to 70%. This is a huge discount. So when we talk about compute resources, you can save a lot. But the problem here is that for some plans, you actually need to be very accurate with your choices. So I work with a client that decided to invest into reserved instances. This was on AWS. At the time, you didn't really have many options. So you actually had this. Right now, there are way more options on AWS, but at the time, you could only buy reserved instances for EC2, and they had to choose which instance family and instance type they want to link those reserved instances to. So this was on AWS. We have loads of instance families and instance types. So this is actually very tricky to make that definition. But they decided, they made the patches, and great. They were waiting for the discounts to be done. And engineering teams, there was no collaboration, there was not that culture of collaboration in that company. So engineering teams, they didn't even know about those purchases. They just kept provisioning instances on their own, and they just kept doing their work. And so there was that disconnect, and it turned out that actually there was no link between reserved instances and instances being provisioned by engineering teams. What does it mean? It means that those engineering teams started provisioning compute resources for regular price, on-demand price. And at the same time, that other team was paying price for your commitment for reserved instances, but they were not being utilized. And basically, this was actually has been going for quite a long time. So in that particular case, this was actually the underutilized reserve instances were there for around 12 months, and no one really noticed that because it's hard to notice. AWS is trying to make interfaces better just to give you that visibility, but at the same time they are trying not, because they want you to spend that money. So this is like they want to be seen as the one helping you with cloud spend, but in practice they will do everything to make sure that you will spend as much as you can. So that company ended up paying a huge amount for on-demand instances, and at the same time paying huge amount of money for reserved instances. So basically paid 3 times as much as they could have paid if they did that right. So we started working with them, and what we could do at the time, like with reserved instances, there was an option to actually those were so-called convertible reserved instances. We could change them into different types. We started working closely with engineering teams to actually make sure that they are aware what is happening, and we just basically managed to actually reduce that underutilization to the very minimum. So there are ways to do that. There are ways to optimize that. You don't really need to impact your agility on the cloud, but you can see that if you don't do that, like the amounts that we are talking here, they are huge. And regardless of whether we are just a single individual, if you're a single individual and you don't have any governance, your account can be hijacked. You may not even know about that, and some people can start doing Bitcoin mining, and you won't be notified. And this is a tricky situation also. So this is really important, regardless of the size of the company. It's really important to make sure that some FinOps principles are applied. So I already mentioned FinOps, but what is FinOps? So FinOps stands for, it's a short for financial operations, and this is a cloud financial framework that brings practices, processes, and tools that empower organizations to improve their cloud spend management. So that framework can bring visibility, can bring governance, and they also talk a lot about culture alignment, because without culture alignment you can't really do much. And this is not only about FinOps. When it comes to culture, I think in most frameworks this is exactly the same with DevOps. The same culture is a huge thing. But the end goal for FinOps is reduce spend, improved governance, and better forecasting. So it's about money, but the FinOps is the goal behind FinOps is to work with engineers. So it's supposed to actually help engineers to make things better. So we can distinguish 4 pillars, fundamental pillars of FinOps. We start with visibility. In order to do anything about your cloud spend, you need to actually be able to gain that insight into your cloud spend and usage. You also need to be able to identify what kind of resources you use, what we need to actually define what resources are attributed to what teams, business units, individuals. You need to have visibility across the board about your cloud spend to actually be able to make informed decisions about resource allocation. So this visibility needs to be to everyone across the company. So when your engineering team makes decision about architecture for new applications, they need to have visibility into that cloud spend situation, financial situation, the cloud at the moment, to be able to introduce that financial decision into the planning. So visibility is the key aspect here. Once we have visibility, we move on to governance. So governance allows you to bring policies, controls, best practices to make sure that you are not surprised by any anomalies. That you can, by introducing governance practices, you can limit your cloud spend for different environments. So maybe for production, you don't really want to have any guardrails, but for POC, for staging development, you want to limit the spend. Maybe for given teams, like you just formed a new team, POC team, to try a new idea, and that idea is risky. You see that as risky, you can limit the spend. So governance is all about making sure that you are not surprised the way those companies were in my previous slide. Once we have governance, we go into optimization. So optimization is about reducing the cloud spend. So governance is about governance is about controlling controlling where your money is going. Optimization is about making sure that you actually reduce the amount of money that is going to cloud providers. So you want to maximize the value of your cloud resources. So you want to have some kind of policies and practices and automation to detect what kind of instance you are running, whether they are underutilized or underutilized. You need to monitor your storage. You need to monitor all your services across the infrastructure, and then you need to work when it comes to architectural decisions. You need you actually need to be able to make educated decisions, because optimization is not only about reducing the cost, it's actually making correct decisions. So you need to understand actually the patterns, your workload patterns. So you need to understand, is it CPU bound, GPU bound, IO bound, and then you select correct services for your workloads. So there are different instance types that you can select for different workloads and different requirements of the workloads. And by doing that, you can increase performance while reducing the cost. So this is win-win situation. And then final part is the culture. So culture is about financial responsibility, to make sure that everyone feel that whatever decision they make, that is going to lead to the cloud spend. And now I'm going to actually move on to some tips and tricks to actually improve your FinOps practices. So first is tagging labeling. I already mentioned that you need to be able to attribute cost to your cloud spend. So you can add tagging to your resources. You can add tagging about environment. You can add tagging to about individuals to provision those resources. You can add tagging to about the business units. Tagging is a critical way, the most important way to actually identify and attribute cost to the given resources. So first, you look into tagging and labeling because it gives you visibility. Then you look into setting budgets and alerts. So this is an automation that can enable you to define guardrails. So you don't cross certain limits, or you are alerted about crossing certain limits of spend, maybe to certain group of resources. So this is second stage. Budget and alerts on your cloud provider can enable you to control your spend and be proactive and be informed about the current situation. And then once we have that in place, when it comes to right sizing resources, this is actually the actual steps that you make. So when you have EC2 on AWS, you just want to see what kind of utilization patterns it uses. You can use some services on AWS. You have Compute Optimizer, you have Trusted Advisor. There are some services that you can utilize to actually improve those actions. But it's all about actually making sure that your provisioning aligns with your workload requirements. And finally, I already mentioned commitment-based plans, and in this case, we can use there on different cloud providers. You have different options, but I really recommend looking into that. So you can look into reserved instances, savings plans on AWS. There are many ways to actually introduce a significant cost spending. You need to be careful about your choices that you make, but the cloud spend, the savings that you can bring this way is really considerable. So and this also fosters accountability and ownership, because by doing that, your engineering teams need to collaborate together to make sure that those plans are utilized effectively. So this was really quick. There is so much to talk about. I'm really passionate about FinOps framework. So I can talk for hours about that. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Teams, not on Teams. Sorry, I'm using Teams a lot on Slack, on our Slack. You can also reach out to me using my email address. So yeah, and any kind of contact, I'm more than happy to have a discussion. If you have any questions about FinOps as well, I'm happy to help you or get involved. So really open for any kind of contact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today and sharing all that expertise with us. We do have a minute, I think, for a question or two. So if anyone has any, please drop them in the chat. And there is one here right away for us to kick off with. Before we do, Matt, I love this slide that you had about horror stories. I feel like it's funny because it's negative stuff, but it's always the things that we think, oh, hopefully we don't end up there. But we know there's a lot of that happens, and you've got some great solutions for us. So thank you. Okay, first question. Can you recommend any tags that should be mandatory on cloud resources for cost tracking and for governance?
Yes, definitely. So I would say there are two tag types that are mandatory for your effective FinOps management. So one is environment. You need to be able to define whether that's production, staging, or development, or any environment you have. And the other one is the owner. And the owner, you can define whoever that is. It can be a business unit, team, individual, but you need to have those two tags to actually be able to start introducing FinOps practices. And there are many others that may be a good practice, but these two are critical.
That makes sense. And Matt, any stories that you have for us of kind of putting some of what, like you had a chance to kind of share some great tips with us today, but do you have any like anecdotes or stories that maybe you didn't get a chance to get to that you really wanted to kind of plug in and share with us? Because we do have kind of a couple minutes here if there's anything top of mind for you.
Yes, I think what I really want to touch on is the fact that I work a lot with companies to introduce FinOps practices, and I can see that engineering teams, they see FinOps as a kind of financial governing body that they see as a threat. So quite often, I just reach out to engineering team. I work a lot directly with engineering teams, and I reach out to them and ask them about the planning, the architecture, and they just perceive me as a threat. And I think this is completely opposite. So we are allies. FinOps framework is an ally to engineering teams. So I'm not sure this is a story, but I think I really wanted to touch on it, that if there is a FinOps practitioner trying to reach out to you talking about FinOps, they are trying to help you if you are engineer. So I think this is quite important to collaborate. It's just break down those silos.
I think that's a great tip. And on that point, Matt, if you're the one from the FinOps side and you're trying to kind of find this ally on the other side, maybe on the engineering team or wherever that is there a certain kind of job title or role or person who tends to be the best one for you to start with to be able to kind of form those relationships?
Yes. So in all teams, business units, there are technical architects that are responsible for financial aspect, and they actually need to report to leadership. And those people are a great start to actually talk to, because this is kind of, we can actually give them a helping hand. So normally I start with talking to those technical architects that are kind of responsible for the underlying architecture, and then we try to work together to bring that FinOps practices to the entire team. So I tend to go from the top to the bottom, and yeah, that seems to be working pretty nicely.
Great, wonderful. And there's one more question that's just come through here. Can you comment on the role of organizational change management in facilitating cloud and DevOps adoption in general and using FinOps methodology specifically? So a bit of a long one there at the end. Let me know if you need me to repeat that.
So actually, this is an interesting question. I'm actually not sure exactly what you mean organization change management, but if you can elaborate on that would be quite helpful. But in general, when it comes actually to working with companies to actually bring that, I would say that, yeah, I mean, in general, it comes to actually working together on all those practices. So when it comes to FinOps and DevOps and cloud adoption, it all actually work together pretty nicely. So this is all about collaboration across the enterprise and making sure that all business units work together efficiently. And I would like to actually follow on that with you, because I'm quite curious what you meant by that.
Sure, Matt, we'll get you to reach out to Denny afterwards. I haven't seen a clarification in the chat just yet, but we've got Slack, we've got places to find you here around the conference. So that is it for Matt today. But Matt, thank you so much for being here. We'll let people know they can go to the DevOps channel in our community Slack to chat with you, and also find you individually as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.